Time for our GMC Sierra tweet of the night. Comes from our friends at CBS Sports. The Steelers haven't seen an L that bad since the 80s. 35-point loss Sunday. It was their worst since week 1 of 1989 when they lost to Cleveland 51-0. Now, Pony, I'm going to date myself here because I was actually old enough to remember this season. I was in elementary school. And the weird thing about that season was I remember that loss to Cleveland. I also remember that team actually making the playoffs and winning on a 50-yard field goal by Gary Anderson in the wild card round. And I think people were astounded that, A, he made a 50-yard field goal because I wasn't that big back then, and B, that they won a playoff game. So that season definitely sticks out to me. Got some tweets to talk about here. We got one from Zach Pony who says, Presley Harvin is next to last in the NFL in punting. If this continues, what do you expect the Steelers to do?
Well, they already brought Jordan Berry in on the practice squad, brought him back. But, you know, the guy last year, Waitman, I think is actually his name, is now Denver's punter. And I know he gets to do it in thin air, but he's been excellent. He was great in that game a couple of weeks ago. I thought he was outstanding while Harvin was obviously dealing with some off-the-field stuff last year. But, hey, he was a great punter in college. He got kind of a excuse last year because off-the-field stuff going on with his father and everything else. But I would agree with the question from the listener or for the viewer. I do not think he's had a good year so far, but he's just so far down on the list of things to worry about, Josh. I think it's just kind of been out of sight, out of mind for a lot of Steelers fans. But overall, their special teams haven't been as good this year. Boswell missing 2 kicks last week. The blocked return from Pierre. Olszewski's already been benched. It has not been a strength of the team this season. Yeah, I think a lot of people expected that upgrade, or at least that natural uptick in Harvin's case with the special teams. Like you said, it just has not happened. Also, to your point, I think the thing that stuck out to me when they re-signed Jordan Berry to the practice squad is one of those alerts that you see come on your phone and you look at it and you go, let's file that one away for later because that may mean something later on. Taking your phone calls, 412-575-2600 on the Borders and Borders hotline. We got Robert in Ross Township. Robert, you're on the Nightly Sports Call.
Hi, Robert. Gentlemen.
Thank you.
This is probably the first time in, since I've been listening to Mike Tomlin, I have not heard him say the standard is the standard.
He said it today.
You gentlemen have any thoughts on that?
He said it today. Didn't he say it today, Pony? He kind of referenced it, but he said it.
Well, he said something about how all their defensive injuries, and there's no excuses for that. So I guess he kind of in a roundabout way alluded to that. But I don't know, man. The standard around here should be winning playoff games. That hasn't happened enough. They obviously, I think, have an issue right now in terms of play caller where quarterbacks change, personnel changes, and not just the results, which are bad, but the philosophy is really bad. It's always to the outside. It's not really a lot of throws to the middle of the field. Wide receivers stay to the outside. The tight ends use the middle of the field. And to your point, Josh, earlier, now Freiermuth is out. They're running on first and second down too much. They're running in the red zone too much when Pickett's in a rhythm. So I don't know. Like, I was hoping on Sunday against the Bills with nothing to lose and with their secondary all banged up that we were going to see Kenny Pickett air it out a little bit more than he did, but they got down and they still fell into their old trap and their old ways of being more of a conservative offense.
I'll add a couple more things onto that. They still have issues with third downs. They still have issues with the red zone. Still inefficient running game. And Pony, those are issues that predate coordinators. They predate quarterbacks. They predate personnel changes. They've had those issues for almost the last half decade, pretty much since Le'Veon Bell walked out the door and Todd Haley walked out the door. The efficiency of the run game left with them. So there are some problems that continue to linger with this offense. Bill in Cranberry, you're on the Nightly Sports Call.
Hey, Bill.
Hey, Pony. Hi, Josh. Hey, I think that there's some seamless changes that can be made. For example, Terrell Austin could be removed, and Sullivan, who's the quarterback coach, who was an offensive coordinator for the Giants in 2016-17, he went 11-5. And they got a guy named Brian Flores. I think he's pretty good for defense. They should probably put him in as a defensive coordinator. And, you know, the other thing, I don't understand why the Rooneys aren't doing anything about sitting Mr. Tomlin down and saying, you better get it fixed or else.
One thing we'll do before you answer the question, we're going to label this one right now as our number one Cochran Go One Better call of the night. We'll get that out of the way because I know there's a lot coming back as far as responses. It was a long question. Pony, I'll let you have the first swing at this one.
Well, why would you fire Austin when the guy probably is third on the list of people that has say in the defense? It's not so much Austin as much as it is Tomlin. And I want to believe or hope that Flores is even having more of a say than Austin because he was one of the best coaches in the NFL before he was dubiously let go by Miami. So I don't think Austin letting him go solves any problems there. I don't think he's calling plays on game day. And as far as Canada for Sullivan, that swap goes, look, it would be probably the same playbook because you're not going to scrap that in the middle of the year. But maybe it would be a different philosophy, and maybe it would be different play calling in different situations. So I'm not opposed to that. The only reason why I would consider that is because there's just nothing about Matt Canada's track record, both in college and in the pros, that suggests to me that he's the right person for this job. And look, I'm afraid, Josh, that if they do just let Canada go after this year, which I'm not convinced they will, by the way, because he still has another year on his contract.
This is true.
If they did, they might just promote Sullivan. And so yeah, and I just don't, that process just perturbs me. You know, they brought Haley in from the outside. That was a good hire at the end of the day. You know, they've got to, I think, have a real in-depth search for the next brains behind the operation to pair with Kenny Pickett. And the way that they landed on Matt Canada and just promoted him a couple of years ago, you know, when that's the way you do it, you're not going to get good results. They did not cast a wide enough net, and now I think they're living with the consequences of that, Josh.
Yeah, I think you're right. They broke that string as far as promoting offensive coordinators because they had done that all the way back to Ken Whisenhunt. He had been a position coach, and they promoted him. Then the same thing with guys after that and so on and so forth. And finally, they brought Haley in from the outside. I'm also glad that we can agree on the fact that after the fact we've had like a 300-foot view of the Todd Haley era. I think more people miss him than probably were happier to see him go. And
I would agree with that.
I think you're right on both counts. I think if you get rid of Terrell Austin now, you get rid of Matt Canada now, I don't think much changes as far as what you see on the field. I think a lot of the plays that you see are going to be the same thing. You may see some difference in situational play calling on the offensive side of the ball. I'm sure some people probably will be happy with that. But outside of that, I agree with you. I don't know if it changes that much, and it doesn't fix every problem that you have. I don't know if changing coordinators is going to force some guys to catch balls and not play volleyball in the middle of the field. I don't know if a coordinator changes.
The only thing I'll say to that about the way they've built their offense around Canada is that it even trickles down to the people working underneath him. His position coaches, other than Sullivan, are all guys that are comfortable working with Canada. The wide receivers coach was around him in college.
True.
The running backs coach was around him in college.
Also true.
And I don't, again, did they hire the best people or did they just hire people that they thought would work well with Matt Canada? I understand if you have a great coordinator who's prickly and difficult to work with, so having people underneath him who work with him well makes sense, but doing all of that for Matt Canada just isn't right. And if you promoted Sullivan, I just don't, could it get worse? Sure,
yep,
but not by much, because it's not very good right now. So that is one risk I would be willing to make.
Those are solid points. We got a question from Chris here, Pony. This is an interesting one. Can we start talking about the possibility of Jim Harbaugh for the Steelers? All he has done is take mediocre teams and turn them into champion caliber teams. 41 regular season wins in 4 seasons, 5 playoff wins, plus twice a season he would coach against his brother. Does that mean he's going to give up a multiple possession lead against his brother twice a year too, or did we forget that part? I mean, but that's the case to be made for Jim Harbaugh. Me, I'm saying immediately hell no, but that's just me. Pony?
Well, I think at the very least, and I'm not convinced this is going to happen, I think that at the end of the year, if they do win just a few games, a handful of games, I do think that there should be a serious conversation about the way Tomlin picks his coaching staff. I also think you brought Andy Weidel in here for Philadelphia, a guy that helped build the Eagles into the last undefeated team. Let's give him the freedom in free agency and in trades to build a better roster and to conduct their drafts. Now, that doesn't mean that Tomlin has to be locked outside of their war room, but it also means that right now he's coaching a football team and not scouting like Weidl is. So Weidl will go into this with more information, just like he did the Eagles draft, which they hit so many home runs. Let that guy do his job. And I'm just afraid that they won't because, look, Tomlin thinks he's earned the right to have his hands in everything. Like Belichick in New England and like Andy Reid, he thinks that he's earned that privilege, and I don't see him relinquishing that or giving that up, Josh.
I would love to see what an Andy Weidl draft would look like. I'm curious to see that coming up next season. Got to take another break. We're wrapping up when we come back. Stick around.